Hi, and welcome to another video guide. This video guide will be on the Boon Vindicator. The Boon Vindicator, also known as the Boondicator, is a new but very strong support build for the current meta. This build is very similar to the Heal Vindicator build, however its job and role is very different and should be treated as such. The Boondicator's role is to be the primary source of all the necessary boons for your subgroup. This includes boons such as stability, protection, might, fury, and resistance. As a boondicator, it is your job to make sure your subgroup has stability at all times, while continuing to provide offensive boons to keep them pumping DPS. This build has the ability to provide permanent uptime on stability, as well as maintain 25 might, protection, fury, vigor, and regen, as well as on-demand resistance to keep your subgroup from getting locked down by other enemies such as rangers. For the gear for this build runs very similar gear setup as the Heal Vindicator. When facing stronger groups, it's highly recommended to run a full minstrel setup with armor, trinkets, and weapons. Unlike the Heal Vindicator, however, this build will be using superior runes of the pack instead of monk runes. Pack runes allow us another source of fury for the subgroup, ensuring that they always have it. It synergizes better with the role the build is trying to achieve. In addition to this, it also provides additional might and swiftness to the subgroup to keep the mobility going, as well as keep might uptime. When facing weaker groups, however, this build can also run full celestial gear, opting for more damage over supplementing the group's sustain. For the weapons of this build, your primary weapon is the staff. The staff provides healing on the auto attack and secondary attack, as well as a block, more healing and cleanse on the fourth, and extreme stability removal from Surge of the Mists. For your secondary weapon set, you have a couple of options. The one that I always run is Mace Axe. Mace provides us a fire field on the second skill, as well as a triple blast finisher on the third skill. The axe provides a 900 range gap closer, as well as a large radius AoE pull, which is useful for stripping stability off of allies, or enemies. As a secondary option, we could also run Sword, offhand. The Sword offhand will provide a 3-target AoE immobilize and a 600 range gap closer that does not require a successful hit to use. This synergizes especially well with the Celestial Gear setup, where you'll get increased condition duration, and therefore increase the duration of your immobilizes on the offhand sword. Additionally, when running the Celestial Gear setup, we could also run Greatsword, in addition to any combination of the previously stated weapons. This will give us a lot more damage and a lot more area damage coverage. For every weapon setup, however, for this build, we will be running Superior Sigil of Energy and Superior Sigil of Concentration. The Energy Sigil is mandatory as it will help us keep dodging to provide boons for the group, and the Superior Sigil of Concentration helps with keeping up times of boons. For our traits for this build, we're going to be running Devastation, Salvation, and Vindicator. The Salvation line is exactly the same as the Heal Vindicator build. We're getting cleansing on our dodge, more protection from when we cleanse, in addition to getting energy back when we dodge to be able to dodge more, as well as providing endurance from when we cleanse conditions off of allies to grant them more endurance, allowing them to sustain more. For the Devastation line, we're going to be running Aggressive Agility. Aggressive Agility makes it so that any of our movement skills will cleanse, immobilize off of ourselves, making us much harder to lock down, which means that we can be that pillar of boons for our subgroup. Assassin's Presence provides AoE Fury for the subgroup since the rework, and at a 5-second duration on a 10-second cooldown, this gives us a baseline of 50% uptime on Fury. Brutality is a very powerful trait that we're also going to be taking in this trait line as well. The way this trait works is that while we have quickness on ourselves, every strike that we do will be stripping stability off of enemies. And this is on a 1-second cooldown per target struck. So if we have an attack that hits three enemies, each one of those enemies will be stripped a stack of stability. For the Vindicator line, we're going to be taking the Anesthesiating J. This just gives us more boons that we can provide from our Alliance stance, Might while we're on Archimedes, and Regen while we're on Saint Victor. Song of Arboretum allows us to give Vigor whenever we dodge, and it improves the effectiveness of Vigor on ourselves. This does not improve the effectiveness of Vigor on allies, only for ourselves. And lastly, we're going to be taking Imperial Impact, or Vassals of the Empire. And this is the bread and butter of the build. What this will do is it'll provide stacks of might every time we dodge, and it'll provide protection every time we dodge. So what this means is that when we dodge, we can provide vigor, protection, and might every single time that we dodge. In addition to this, every time we dodge, this will actually increase the duration of boons already on our allies by 2 seconds. So all of the boons such as stability, quickness, alacrity, even resistance, all of those boons will get extended every single time we dodge, improving the amount of boons that can be maintained on our allies. So your basic rotation for this build is going to be dodging, using weapon swap, and then waiting for your dodge to come back, dodging again, using energy meld, and then dodging again. So we can get into combat, we can dodge, weapon swap, it's almost full again because of our energy sigil, and then once it's full, we can dodge again, energy meld, using this, which gives us 50 of our endurance back, dodge again, weapon swap, and that's pretty much what you're going to do for your basic rotation, regardless of what stance you're on. Now, as far as the stances go, we do want to be running Legendary Dwarf stance and Alliance stance for this build. Our Legendary Dwarf stance will give us our Inspiring Reinforcement, which is our only source of stability on this build. And while it's our only source, it is a very powerful source of stability. On top of that, we also have the Rite of the Great Dwarf, which will give us 50% damage reduction for all of our allies in our subgroup. On our Alliance stance, we have Tree Song. This will cleanse conditions on yourself and allies, and it'll give you endurance back for every condition that is cleansed. When we'll get bonus endurance for every condition that we cleanse on ourselves because of Invigorating Dismissal. So, as far as skill priority is concerned, when we're on the Legendary Dwarf stance, we want to be prioritizing this over everything. Again, this is our only source of stability, and while it is our only source, it is very, very, very powerful. It's only got a 10-second cooldown, and it can give stability to up to 30 allies. So when we put this down, the way that this is coded is that there are 6 individual segments of this road, and each one of those has a target cap of 5. So in total, we can potentially give a stability to 30 of our allies. So when we have a bunch of Boondicators in our squad, that means that each one of our Boondicators using this will stack up stability every single second on our allies. So we could potentially have much, much, much more stability than even what you see here. Now, the Rite of the Great Dwarf, we want to be using this as much as we can. We do want to be using it as much as we can because it's a 50% damage reduction. However, it is extremely expensive. It's a 40 energy cost. So we want to be using this when we're pushing into an enemy Zerg. If you know that we're about to push into an enemy Zerg, you want to make sure you have try and have at least 70 energy, because that means you can use this, your Inspiring Reinforcement, and then also use the Rite of the Great Dwarf, and then you can swap over into this and provide healing while your Inspiring Reinforcement is cooling down. So on our alliance stance, our highest priority is going to be Tree Song because this will give us, like I said, our cleansing. We also have Battle Dance, which will give us AoE resistance to all of our allies. So if we're facing groups with lots of immobilizes, such as Maguma, we want to be using this because it can keep our allies from getting locked down by entangles. We also have a group break stun with Awakening here that's only on a 10-second cooldown. The advantage of this skill over something like our Firebrand mantras is that while you can't use it back to back to back to back like you can with the Elite Stab on the Firebrand mantras, this can be used much more often because it only has a 10-second cooldown. To pair with that, we also have Selfless Spirit and our Uranus St. Victor. Now, these, even on this build without the Monk Runes, these are very powerful sources of healing alongside of our staff. Since this is a boon build, our highest priority, though, is still going to be this. We don't want to prioritize their Uranus St. Victor, although we can use this, we can use our Selfless Spirit as much as we can because it's a very low energy cost, very low cooldown, and it'll heal our allies. But we really don't want to actually try and be using this on this build because unless we have the spare energy for it. Some useful tips and tricks for this build, especially for people that are very new to the build. You can treat your stances here like your Firebrand tomes. Your Dwarf stance is very similar to Firebrand Tome 3, and your Alliance stance is very similar to your Firebrand Tome 2. The times in battle when you want to be using your Tome 3 like you normally would on a Firebrand is the same times that you want to be sure that you're on Legendary Dwarf stance. That's when you're providing your stability, that's when you're getting your damage reduction. Those are the same times. The times in battle when you are using your Tome 3, that's when you want to be on your Legendary Alliance stance. The advantage of this over the Firebrand Tomes is that you can swap back and forth between these every 10 seconds. Another tip that I want to give is that you want to try and use your Inspiring Reinforcement always right before swapping into your Legendary Alliance stance. So if you are on your Dwarf stance and you first use your Inspiring Reinforcement, you're sitting here, you're dodging, weapon swapping, getting all that back using this, and you're using this again, and you're ready to, you can see that it's on cooldown, but you're ready to, because you're at the point in the battle where you're kind of resting a bit and you're not really wanting to use this again. Try and still get this off right before swapping into your Alliance stance because your Alliance stance or your Legend swap has the same cooldown as the Inspiring Reinforcement. So when you know that this is off cooldown, you know that your Dwarf Road is also off cooldown so that you can immediately swap into it and use it. And that is pretty much it for the Boondicator build. I hope this build was clear in how to use it, its role, what skills you want to prioritize. Remember that you want to be using your Dwarf Road as much as possible, as well as dodging as much as possible, because you're the main supplier of boons, both offensive and defensive for this build. And that's pretty much it. Hope this guide helped, and I will see you guys later.